Her entire life, she thought her father had adopted her, giving her the stable home she needed since her earliest years. But one day, she found an old photograph in the attic, a photograph that would change everything and expose the dark, sinister truth her father had been hiding from her. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the Caldwell mansion, creating golden patches on the polished hardwood floors. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that promised nothing but leisure and relaxation. 14-year-old Isla Caldwell lay sprawled on the living room couch, her dark braids adorned with colorful clips falling over her shoulders as she scrolled through her phone. From her position, she could see her father, Edward Caldwell, sitting at the wrought iron table by the pool, sipping his coffee while watching the morning news on his tablet. Dressed in casual khakis and a light blue button-up with sleeves rolled to his elbows, he looked the picture of weekend tranquility. "Miss Isla, would you mind moving your feet?" "I need to clean under there," came Maria Alvarez's gentle voice, breaking Isla's social media trance. Isla quickly tucked her legs up. "Sorry, Maria. I didn't even notice you there." Maria smiled warmly as she ran the vacuum under the spot Isla had just vacated. At 35, Maria had been with the Caldwells for nearly 11 years now. She had come to America as an immigrant in her early 20s, with little more than determination and a willingness to work hard. Edward had taken a chance on her back then, offering her a position when she desperately needed it. Her honesty and meticulous work ethic had quickly made her indispensable to the household. "Did Carla text you about the science project yet?" Maria asked, genuinely interested in Isla's life as she always was. "Yeah, she wants to meet tomorrow to work on it. She thinks we should do something about biodegradable plastics," Isla replied, then launched into a detailed explanation of the project parameters. Maria listened attentively as she worked, asking questions at all the right moments. For Isla, Maria was more than just the live-in maid. She was a confidant, a shoulder to lean on, a female presence in a house that had never known a mother's touch, or so Isla had always been told. "There," Maria said, turning off the vacuum cleaner. "Lower floor is all done, now I just need to go upstairs." Isla immediately jumped up. "I'll come with you, I was getting bored down here anyway." Together they climbed the grand staircase, Maria carrying her cleaning bucket, while Isla chatted about school drama. Through the upstairs window, Edward noticed them and called out, "Maria, could you please clean the attic today? It's been a while since it was given a proper dusting." "Yes, sir," Maria replied with a respectful nod. Edward's gaze shifted to his daughter. "Isla, honey, don't disturb Maria while she cleans the attic. Why don't you come swim with me instead?" Isla's brow furrowed. "Why can't I go to the attic with her? You never let me up there." "There's nothing up there but dust and cobwebs," Edward replied, his tone light but his eyes serious. "It's not a place for kids." "I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I'm 14, Isla protested. Edward's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "The pool is much nicer than a musty old attic. Trust me." Isla rolled her eyes. "Fine, I'll just text Carla from my room." Edward seemed to relax a bit at that. "Okay, sweetie." As Isla and Maria continued up the stairs, Edward caught Maria's gaze and gave her a meaningful look. Maria nodded slightly in understanding. In all these years, she had never questioned why Edward kept the attic off limits to Isla, assuming it was simply a health concern. Old houses had all sorts of potential allergens and hazards after all. Maria detoured to the garage and returned with the attic key. She headed for the pull-down staircase at the end of the hallway, assuming Isla had gone to her room as she'd said. But Isla, curiosity burning within her, had other plans. She waited until Maria had climbed the narrow stairs and then quietly followed behind her. When she poked her head into the attic, Maria was already inside, setting down her cleaning supplies. The older woman turned, startled by Isla's presence. "Miss Isla?" Maria put her hands on her hips in exasperation. "You shouldn't have lied to your father. You know he doesn't want you up here." Isla pressed her finger to her lips. "Please, Maria. I won't make any noise, and I won't tell Dad. I just want to see what's so special about this place that I've been forbidden from it my whole life." Maria shook her head, clearly torn. "We'll both be in trouble if your father finds out. You know how serious he is about the attic." Looking around, Isla could see why her father might want to keep her away. The place was filthy. Dust covered every surface, cobwebs stretched between old furniture, and stacks of boxes created a maze throughout the space. But nothing seemed particularly dangerous or mysterious. It would take you hours to clean all this by yourself, Isla reasoned. I'll help you and we'll finish before Dad even realizes. Please. Maria sighed deeply, knowing that arguing would only waste more time and increase the risk of Edward discovering them. 10 minutes, she conceded. Then you go back to your room. Deal, Isla agreed eagerly. As they began to clean, Isla found herself drawn to the items stored away in the attic. There was an old wooden baby pen, boxes of tiny clothes, and toys that hadn't seen the light of day in years. A bassinet sat in one corner, covered with a sheet for protection. Why would Dad keep all this baby stuff? She wondered aloud. Maria merely shrugged, focusing on her task of dusting the high beams. A colourful box caught Isla's eye, and she knelt to inspect it. Inside were children's books, their covers faded but still charming. She pulled out one with a particularly silly illustration on the front, chuckling at the cartoon animals. As she flipped through the pages, something slipped out and fluttered to the floor. Isla bent down to pick it up, a photograph. In it, her father, looking much younger, stood beside a beautiful black woman in a hospital bed. In the woman's arms was a tiny infant, wrapped in a blue blanket. Her breath caught in her throat. Isla had always been told that her father had adopted her after her birth mother died in childbirth. Edward Caldwell was her adoptive father. That was the story she'd grown up with, the story she'd never questioned. But the baby in the photograph looked just like the baby pictures she'd seen of herself. And the woman. The woman had Isla's same deep brown eyes, the same high cheekbones, the same warm smile. Maria, Isla called, her voice barely above a whisper. Who is this woman? As Maria turned to look, they heard the distinct sound of the pool sliding door opening. Panic flashed across Maria's face. Go quickly, she urged. Your father's coming inside. Isla scrambled down from the attic, the photograph clutched tightly in her hand. She barely made it to her bedroom before she heard her father's voice calling up the stairs. Isla, are you still up there? I was thinking we could go out somewhere this weekend if you want. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she quickly hid the photograph behind her back. Edward appeared in her doorway, his smile faltering as he took in her flustered appearance. What are you up to? He asked, his tone light but his eyes watchful. Nothing, Isla replied too quickly. Just texting Carla. Edward's gaze dropped to her hands, hidden awkwardly behind her back. What's that you're hiding? Hiding? I'm not hiding anything, she lied, but her voice betrayed her. Edward crossed the room in 3 long strides. Isla, what's behind your back? Knowing she couldn't keep up the charade, Isla reluctantly brought her hands forward, revealing the photograph. I found this, she admitted. Who is this woman? And the baby? Edward's face drained of colour as he snatched the photograph from her hands. For a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Then his expression hardened, and he stalked to the hallway. Maria, he bellowed. Maria, come down here right now. The sound of hurried footsteps came from above, as Maria descended from the attic. She stood before Edward, her eyes downcast. Mr. Caldwell, I can explain. I specifically told you not to let Isla in the attic. Edward cut her off, his voice eerily calm despite the anger evident in his rigid posture. I trusted you with one simple task and you deliberately disobeyed me. Sir, please, she begged me to let her stay. I thought... You're fired, Edward stated flatly. Pack your things and leave today. Isla gasped. Dad, no, you can't fire Maria. It wasn't her fault. It was mine. I forced her to let me come up. Please, don't do this. Edward ignored his daughter's pleas, his gaze fixed coldly on Maria. I'm going out. When I return, I don't want to see you here. Dad, Isla cried, tears springing to her eyes. I love Maria. She's been with us for years, more than a decade. I never thought you'd be this angry over something so small. Edward rarely raised his voice or showed any sign of temper. He was known for his calm, collected demeanour, a trait that had served him well in his business dealings. But now his hands trembled slightly as he clutched the photograph. "Who is that woman in the photo, Dad?" Isla pressed, desperate to understand the source of his rage. "Why are you so upset about this?" Edward's jaw clenched. After a long moment, he let out a heavy sigh. "The woman in the photograph was my sister," he said, his voice strained. "She and her baby both died in an accident many years ago. This picture was taken when I visited her in the hospital after the birth." Isla frowned, not fully convinced. Why keep it hidden in the attic? Why not tell me about her? "It's too painful to talk about," Edward replied curtly. "That's enough questions. This photograph stays with me and we won't discuss it further." He turned back to Maria, who stood with her head bowed. "As for you, I'll transfer your salary for this month to your account. Now go." "Sir," Maria spoke up, her voice wavering slightly. "My gold, I still have some of my gold with you." Isla looked between them, confused. She knew that Maria had worked for their family for nearly a decade, and during that time, she'd watched her father help Maria with financial matters. A few years ago, Maria had approached Edward for advice on safely investing her savings, money she'd carefully set aside from years of wages. Without a bank account she fully trusted, Maria had asked Edward to keep her small investment, several gold coins and bars, in his personal safe. Edward had agreed, promising the gold would be safer with him and might even increase in value. "I'll get it for you before you leave," Edward said dismissively. "Now please, go pack your things." Maria nodded, gathered her cleaning supplies and headed downstairs, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Isla stood in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. Her father, this man she'd always seen as gentle and fair, had just fired the only maternal figure in her life over a simple act of disobedience. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that his explanation about the woman in the photograph didn't quite add up. As Edward moved to return to his room, Isla caught a glimpse of the photograph still in his hand. A chill ran down her spine as she wondered what other secrets might be hidden in the dusty corners of the attic. Isla followed her father to his bedroom, her mind racing with questions she dared not ask. Edward moved purposefully to the large painting on the wall, a landscape of the Mediterranean coast, and swung it aside to reveal a sleek digital safe embedded in the wall. She watched as he entered the code, his body partially blocking her view, but she managed to catch the sequence of numbers as his fingers moved across the keypad. The safe opened with a soft click, and Edward reached inside. He removed a small velvet pouch and closed the safe again, the painting swinging back into place. From the desk drawer he retrieved his wallet, phone and keys. "Dad," Isla tried once more, her voice small and pleading, "please don't fire Maria. She's the only one I have to talk to when you're not around. I love her." Edward's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "That's precisely the problem, Isla. She's worked here so long that she's becoming too familiar, too comfortable disregarding my instructions. This is final and you should learn something from it too." "Learn what? That people who make tiny mistakes get thrown away?" Isla shot back, anger rising through her grief. Edward ignored her comment and headed downstairs. Isla followed, watching as he strode toward Maria's quarters at the back of the house. When they arrived, Maria was already waiting, her suitcase packed and standing beside her. Edward handed her the velvet pouch. "Your gold, make sure you keep it safe." Maria nodded, carefully placing the pouch in her handbag. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her composure maintained even in this moment of injustice. Isla rushed forward and threw her arms around Maria's neck. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is all my fault." "Shh, it's okay, Isla," Maria soothed, stroking Isla's braids as she had done countless times over the years. "Your father will find someone else to take care of you. You won't be lonely." "I don't want anyone else," Isla insisted, pulling back to look into Maria's face. "I love you. I'm so sorry I made you lose your job." Maria cupped Isla's cheek gently. "Be good, yes? Take care of yourself." They embraced one last time before Maria picked up her suitcase and handbag. With a final, dignified nod to Edward, she walked out the door and out of their lives. Edward grabbed his car keys. "I need to clear my head," he muttered. "Stay in the house, Isla." "I won't be long." Before Isla could protest, he too was gone, the sound of his luxury car fading down the driveway. Alone in the large house, Isla felt a crushing emptiness descend upon her. She climbed the stairs slowly, intending to cry in the privacy of her bedroom, but stopped when she noticed the attic door still ajar. A surge of anger propelled her forward. Because of this mysterious attic and whatever secrets it held, Maria was gone. Her father had overreacted in a way she'd never seen before. None of it made sense. Determined to find answers, Isla climbed the attic stairs once more. The space felt different now, ominous rather than merely curious. She wandered among the boxes and forgotten furniture, wondering why her father would keep all these nursery items if they belonged to his dead sister. Wouldn't they be with her husband or other family members? A photo album peeking out from one of the boxes caught her eye. She pulled it out and began to flip through the pages, finding more images of the woman from the photograph. In some, she was alone. In others, she stood beside a younger Edward. Then she found it, a family portrait taken at what appeared to be a wedding. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the woman from the hospital photo, now dressed in a beautiful white gown. Beside her stood Edward in a tuxedo, his arm around her waist, both of them beaming with happiness. Isla's mind reeled as she compared the images. The woman wasn't Edward's sister at all, she was his wife. And if that was the case, what other lies had he told? The sound of the front gate opening cut through her thoughts. Her father was back already. Quickly, she slipped the wedding photo into her pocket and closed the album, returning it to its box. She needed more time to process what she'd discovered, but for now she had to get out of the attic before her father caught her there again. As Isla reached the bottom of the attic stairs, she heard a soft metallic sound, like a key dropping on the hardwood floor. Her heart leaped into her throat. Had her father already come upstairs? She crept cautiously toward the hallway, preparing herself for another confrontation. But instead of her father, she spotted Maria walking slowly toward Edward's bedroom. "Maria!" Isla called out, confusion and relief mingling in her voice. Maria jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Dios mío, Miss Isla, you scared me." "Why are you back?" Isla asked, approaching her. "Did you forget something?" Maria hesitated, glancing toward Edward's bedroom door. I'm looking for your father. I think he still has some of my gold. What he gave me was only 25 grams, but there should be another 55 grams more, I remember clearly." "Oh," Isla replied. "He just left after you left. You saw him. I could call him if you want." Maria shook her head quickly. "I already did, but he said I only had 25 grams. I know that's not right." Isla frowned, recalling how swiftly her father had dismissed Maria earlier. "We could wait for him to come back and talk about it." Maria gave a sad smile. "Your father and I both know the gold is kept in his personal safe. Do you perhaps know the code? We could just check if it's really there or not." Isla hesitated, weighing her loyalty to her father against her trust in Maria. The woman who had braided her hair, dried her tears, and listened to her stories for as long as she could remember. After what she'd just discovered in the attic, doubt about her father's honesty had already taken root. "I saw him enter it earlier," Isla admitted. "I can open it for you." They walked to Edward's bedroom, and Isla moved to the painting that concealed the safe. With careful precision, she entered the code she'd memorized earlier, and the safe door swung open. Inside were stacks of important-looking documents, some jewelry, expensive watches, and various folders labeled with Isla's name, but no gold bars. Maria sighed, clearly disappointed but not surprised. "I was afraid of this," she murmured. Isla was about to close the safe when a manila envelope with an official-looking seal caught her eye. She pulled it out, curiosity overriding her sense of privacy. Court of Domestic Relations was emblazoned across the top, along with a case number. Her hands trembling slightly, Isla opened the envelope and pulled out the contents. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first page, a divorce certificate between Edward Caldwell and Lena Rivera. And there, in black and white, was her own name listed next to Lena Rivera's. "Maria," she whispered, her voice shaking, "I think I just found out who my real mother is." Before Maria could respond, they heard the sound of the front gate opening and a car pulling into the driveway. "Your father's back," Maria said urgently. "Quick, close the safe." Isla hastily shoved the papers back into the envelope, but kept it clutched in her hand as she sealed the safe and replaced the painting. She darted to her room, hiding the court documents beneath her mattress, then rushed downstairs with Maria. They reached the foyer just as Edward walked through the front door. His expression darkened immediately upon seeing Maria. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I specifically told you I didn't want to see you when I returned." Maria stood her ground. "I came back for the rest of my gold, sir. There should be 55 grams more than what you gave me this morning." Edward's jaw tightened. "There is no more gold, Maria. I gave you everything that was yours." "That's not true," Maria countered, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "I remember clearly when I gave you money to buy 55 grams of gold 3 years ago. That money was from my family's inheritance. I trusted you with it." "There's no proof, no receipt," Edward scoffed. "You're making things up, trying to take advantage of our relationship." He pulled out his phone. "If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing." His finger hovered over the emergency call button, and Maria faltered. She looked at Isla, her eyes filled with regret, then back to Edward. "This isn't right," she said softly, but without further argument she turned and walked out the door. Edward watched her go, then turned to Isla. "That's why we don't fully trust people, Isla, no matter how long they've worked for us. Everyone looks out for themselves in the end." Isla stared at her father. This man she'd always admired and respected, now suddenly a stranger to her. He'd lied about the woman in the photograph, about being her adoptive father, and now possibly about Maria's gold. "I'm going to Carla's house," she announced abruptly, unable to bear being in the same house with him any longer. "This weekend is ruined anyway." Edward seemed relieved by her suggestion. "Fine, I have some work to catch up on here." Isla hurried to her room, retrieved the court documents from beneath her mattress, and stuffed them into her backpack. As she passed through the living room, Edward was already on his laptop, engrossed in whatever financial matters occupied his time on weekends. She left without another word, closing the front door behind her with a quiet finality. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down on the pristine suburban street. Isla pulled out the divorce papers, searching for an address. There it was, Lena Rivera's last known residence, listed as part of the settlement. According to the documents, the home had been awarded to her along with child custody. Isla checked the address on her phone's map app. It was only 3 bus stops away. Taking a deep breath, she headed toward the nearest bus stop, determined to find the woman who might be her real mother. As she approached the bus stop, she spotted a familiar figure sitting on the bench. Maria, weighed down by her suitcase and bags, waiting for her own bus. "Maria!" Isla called out, rushing toward her. Maria looked up, surprised. "Miss Isla? What are you doing here?" Isla quickly explained what she'd found in the divorce papers and her plan to find Lena Rivera. "I think she's my real mother, Maria, and I think my dad has kept something from me. Do you think she's been lying my whole—" Concern washed over Maria's face. "I'm not sure, love, but I can tell this is very serious. Perhaps you shouldn't go alone. Maybe ask your dad about it first. He would be upset, but he's still your father. He would have an answer." Isla considered, but she didn't seem satisfied. "I don't know. I don't feel, after everything he did to you." Isla asked Maria hopefully, "Will you come with me?" Maria hesitated. "I want to help you, but I don't wish to cause more trouble. Your father is very angry with me already." The bus approached, its brakes hissing as it pulled up to the curb. Maria looked at her heavy bags, then at Isla's pleading face. "I need to drop these bags at my home," she finally said. "They're too heavy to carry around. But here—" She pulled out a small notepad and pen from her purse, quickly writing down her phone number and address. If you need anything at all, you call me, understand? Isla nodded, tucking the paper into her pocket. They boarded the bus together, but 3 stops later, Isla stood to leave. Be careful, brave girl, Maria warned as Isla stepped off the bus. And call me when you're done. I want to know you're safe. I will, Isla promised, waving as the bus pulled away. Standing alone at the unfamiliar bus stop, Isla checked the address once more and began walking toward what she hoped would be answers to the questions that had upended her world in a single day. Isla's heart pounded as she approached the modest 2-story house at the end of the tree-lined street. It wasn't as large or grand as her father's mansion, but it had a welcoming charm. Window boxes filled with bright flowers, a small, well-kept garden, a porch swing gently moving in the afternoon breeze. She stood at the bottom of the steps, gathering her courage. If the woman who lived here really was her mother, how would she react to Isla showing up unannounced? Would she even recognize her? Want her? Taking a deep breath, Isla climbed the steps and pressed the doorbell. The melodic chime echoed inside, followed by approaching footsteps. The door swung open, and Isla found herself face to face with a woman who could have been her reflection in 20 years' time. The same deep brown eyes, high cheekbones, full lips. Her hair was styled in short, natural curls, and fine lines creased the corners of her eyes, but the resemblance was undeniable. The woman froze, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Are you Lena Rivera?" Isla asked, her voice quavering. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Isla's face. She seemed to be fighting the urge to reach out and touch her, to confirm that Isla was real and not a figment of her imagination. "My name is Isla Caldwell," Isla continued. I think you might be my mother." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Isla," she breathed, the name a prayer on her lips. "My baby girl." She stepped forward as if to embrace Isla, then stopped herself, composing her features into something more controlled. "Please come in," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The interior of the house was warm and inviting, filled with colorful artwork and comfortable furniture. Isla followed Lena to a cozy living room where they sat facing each other, both too overwhelmed to speak at first. "How did you find me?" Lena finally asked. "I found these in my dad's safe," Isla said, pulling the papers from her backpack. "There was a photo in the attic this morning, you, my dad, and a baby, in a hospital. He got really upset when I found it. He even fired Maria, our maid, just for letting me go up there. Then when he left the house, I went back and found these." Lena's eyes widened. "I'm so sorry, Isla, that must be hard on you." "She's been taking care of me since I was 3, Isla explained. "She's practically raised me alongside Dad." Lena nodded slowly, processing this information. "Isla, what has your father told you about your mother?" Isla swallowed hard. "He told me my mother died giving birth to me and that he adopted me afterward." She hesitated, then added, "But that's not true, is it? You're my real mother, and he's my real father, not my adoptive father. This paper said so." "Yes," Lena confirmed softly. "Edward is your biological father, and I am your mother. And as you can see, I'm very much alive." "Then why?" Isla asked, her voice breaking. "Why did he lie to me? Why did he keep us apart?" Lena sighed deeply, pain etched across her features. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Your father and I divorced shortly after you were born. He wanted full custody of you, but the court awarded it to me since you were still an infant and I was breastfeeding. Edward has always been a man who gets what he wants, and he wasn't happy with the arrangement." She gestured around the house. "The court ordered him to provide this house for us and monthly support payments, but about a year later, he came to me with an offer, a large sum of money in exchange for you." Isla's eyes widened in disbelief. "He bought me?" Before Lena could respond, there was a forceful knock at the front door. They froze, Lena's expression shifting from sadness to fear. "Isla," she whispered urgently, "go hide in the bathroom now." "Why?" "Who is it?" "I think it's your father," Lena said, rising from her seat. "I'm not afraid of my father. Why should I hide from him? Please, just go. I don't want him to know you're here." Isla hesitated for only a moment, before hurrying down the hallway and into the bathroom, leaving the door slightly ajar so she could hear. She'd left her backpack in the living room. She realized too late. Clear evidence of her presence. From her hiding place, she heard the front door open and her father's voice, sharp and demanding. "Where is she, Lena? Where's Isla?" How had he known she would come here, Isla wondered. "She's not here, Edward," she heard Lena respond, her voice steady despite the evident tension. "Don't lie to me," Edward growled, his voice low and sharp. "She found the divorce papers, I know it. The painting wasn't straight when I entered the bedroom, and when I checked the safe, they were gone. She told me she was going to a friend's house, but she's not there, so don't play dumb. I know she came looking for you." Isla's heart hammered in her chest. The father she'd known her whole life, gentle, reasonable, caring, sounded like a completely different person now. His voice was cold and threatening in a way she'd never heard before. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now," Lena stated firmly. There was a moment of silence, then a sharp sound that made Isla jump, the unmistakable crack of a slap, followed by a crash as something, or someone, fell against furniture. "I warned you years ago what would happen if you ever tried to see her again." Edward's voice was low and menacing now. Isla's fear turned to horror as she realized her presence had put her mother in danger. She had to do something, call for help, create a distraction, anything to stop whatever was happening in the living room. But as she reached for her phone, she realized with a sinking feeling that it was in her backpack. The backpack she'd left in plain sight in the living room. Heart pounding, Isla crept out of the bathroom and peered down the hallway toward the living room. What she saw made her blood run cold. Edward stood over Lena, who was sprawled on the floor beside an overturned coffee table. Her backpack was in his hands, its contents spilled across the floor, including the divorce papers. "Where is she?" Edward demanded again, his voice unnervingly calm despite the violence of his actions. "I told you, she's not here," Lena insisted, slowly pushing herself up. Edward's gaze swept the room, then down the hallway. Isla quickly ducked back, but not fast enough. Their eyes met for a split second before she retreated into the bathroom. "Isla," Edward called out, "I know you're here. I saw you. Come out now and let's go home." Heavy footsteps approached the bathroom door. It swung open violently, revealing Edward, his face a mask of cold fury that Isla had never seen before. "Dad," she whispered, backing away until she hit the shower wall. "Why are you doing this?" "Well, get your things," he ordered. "We're going home." "No," Isla shook her head. "Not until you tell me the truth, all of it." Edward's jaw clenched. In one swift motion, he grabbed her arm and dragged her from the bathroom. Isla struggled against his grip, shocked by his roughness. "Let go of me," she cried. As they entered the living room, Lena rushed forward. "Don't you dare hurt her, Edward." Edward released Isla only to shove Lena away with enough force to send her stumbling back. "This is your fault," he snarled. "I warned you what would happen if you ever tried to contact her." "She found me," Lena shot back. "Your lies are catching up with you, Edward. She deserves to know the truth." Edward's expression darkened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his car keys. "Both of you outside, now." When neither woman moved, he grabbed Isla's arm again, his fingers digging painfully into her skin. "I won't ask again." "Dad, you're hurting me," Isla whimpered, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, something like regret flashed across Edward's features, but it was quickly replaced by determination. "Outside," he repeated. Seeing no choice, Isla allowed herself to be led to the front door. Lena followed, her eyes never leaving Edward's hand on her daughter's arm. Once outside, Edward marched them to his car, parked haphazardly in the driveway. He opened the back door and pushed Isla inside, then rounded on Lena. "Get in," he ordered. "Edward, please," Lena pleaded. "Let's talk about this rationally. Isla's old enough to understand." "Get in the car," he roared, causing both women to flinch. Lena reluctantly slid into the back seat beside Isla. Edward slammed the door and moved to the driver's side. As he started the engine, Isla whispered to Lena, "I'm so sorry, this is all my fault." Lena squeezed her hand. No, Isla, none of this is your fault. Edward drove erratically, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Dad, what are you doing? Isla asked, fear constricting her throat. He didn't answer. When they arrived at the Caldwell mansion, Edward parked in the garage and turned to face them. Out, he commanded. Inside the house, he directed them up the stairs toward the attic. Isla exchanged a terrified glance with Lena. Edward, this is kidnapping, Lena tried to reason with him. You cannot do this to us. Let's talk. Shut up, he snapped, pushing them up the attic stairs. The space that had seemed merely mysterious that morning now felt sinister. Edward forced them to sit against one of the support beams, their backs to each other. With practiced efficiency, he bounded their hands to the beam with rope he found among the stored items. He stuffed cloth into their mouths as gags, ignoring Isla's tearful pleas. I'll be back, he said coldly, descending the stairs and locking the attic door behind him. Isla struggled against the ropes, but they only dug deeper into her wrists, leaving behind fresh bruises. Beside her, she could feel Lena twisting and pulling too, just as desperate to break free. After what felt like an eternity, Isla spotted a broken wooden rocking horse not far from Lena's feet. She nudged Lena and gestured with her head toward the toy. Understanding dawned in Lena's eyes, and she stretched her leg out, managing to hook her foot around one of the rockers and drag it closer. With painstaking effort, Isla maneuvered herself to use the handle on the side of the horse's head to pry the gag from her mouth. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she worked the cloth loose, finally spitting it out with a gasp of relief. I'm going to get us out of here, she promised Lena, who nodded encouragingly despite her own gag. Isla was about to begin working on Lena's gag when she heard voices from downstairs. She froze, straining to listen. One voice was clearly her father's, but there seemed to be at least two others. One of them female. Could it be Maria? Isla exchanged a hopeful glance with Lena, who had also heard the voices. Gathering all her strength, Isla shouted, "Help! We're in the attic! Help us!" Lena joined in, her cries muffled by the gag but still audible. They called out repeatedly, hoping someone would hear them over whatever conversation was happening below. Suddenly the attic door flew open and Edward appeared, his face contorted with rage. "Shut up," he hissed. "No one can hear you." But as he approached them, Isla caught a glimpse of uncertainty in his eyes. "Maria was here, wasn't she?" she asked. "Did she leave? Who else is down there?" Edward ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Isla had seen many times before. "No one who can help you," he replied. "Now let's talk about our options." Using his foot, he pushed the rocking horse away and crouched down to Isla's level. "Option 1, he began, his voice eerily calm again. "We can all be happy. We can forget the past and live together as a wealthy family. We'll sell this house, move somewhere new, and start fresh." He turned to Lena. "We can put the past behind us, can't we, Lena?" "For Isla's sake." Lena glared at him over her gag, hatred burning in her eyes. "Option 2, Edward continued, is much less pleasant. We all go our separate ways, living lonely, sad lives." He paused, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "I send Lena to Jake." At this, Lena's eyes widened in terror. "And Isla goes to a monastery overseas, run by a friend of mine, your choice." "I don't understand," Isla said, her voice shaking. "You're so overreacting, Dad. All of this, it's too much. You never acted like this to me. Why are you so upset? Why can't we just talk like normal people?" Edward sighed heavily. "Lena, why don't you tell her the truth, all of it?" He reached over and removed Lena's gag. She coughed and worked her jaw before speaking. "After I gave birth to you," she began, her voice hoarse, "I discovered that Edward already had a wife, his first wife. She couldn't have children of her own and wanted to adopt you. They offered me money, a lot of money, to give you up." Isla gasped, looking at her father in disbelief. "I refused," Lena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's when Edward divorced me. The court awarded me custody, this house, even monthly support. But when you were about a year old, he took you from me. He said if I went to the police, he'd kill me, and he meant it." She looked away, her eyes glistening. And he told me he wouldn't hesitate to abandon you if anything happened to him because of me. So that's why you told me you were my adoptive father? Isla asked. Because you never really want me? Edward didn't deny any of it. I didn't want you asking questions about your mother. My first wife, Celine, was desperate for a child, always whining, always crying about not being able to have one. She begged me to adopt. But then I met your mother, and I figured if I was going to have a kid, it might as well be my own blood. Maybe even my ticket out of that miserable marriage. He let out a bitter laugh. But your mother? She was worse than Celine, a damn idealist, thought love and truth were everything. She flipped when she found out what I did for a living, a financial broker, right after the pregnancy. That's when I realized she wasn't just naive, she was a threat. So when you're born, I didn't want to form too deep an attachment. Who was the first wife? Isla asked. I've never seen any woman at our house. She took care of you until you were 3, Edward replied. Then the stock market crashed and I had debts to pay. She took what money was left and disappeared, leaving me to raise you alone. That's when I hired Maria. She's a lifesaver. It was all too much to process. Isla felt sick, trapped in this nightmare version of her life where nothing was as it seemed. So now, Edward continued, I'm offering you both a chance. We can be a family again. A real family. I've recovered financially and Isla's nearly grown. We can forget the past. Isla exchanged a disgusted look with Lena. The idea of playing happy family with this man who had lied, kidnapped and threatened them was absurd. We'll never agree to that, Isla stated firmly. Just let us go, please, Dad. Edward's face hardened. Then it's option 2. I'll simplify my life. He called out, Jake, come up here. Who's Jake? Isla asked Lena quietly. Before Lena could answer, heavy footsteps sounded on the attic stairs, and a burly man in a leather jacket appeared. His cold eyes swept over the 2 bound women without emotion. Jake here is very good at making people disappear, Edward said casually, as if commenting on the weather. I keep men like him around for the kind of situations my line of work occasionally demands. Terror gripped Isla. No, please don't hurt us. Just let me leave with my mum. I won't tell anyone what happened. Too risky, Edward shook his head. You can continue to be my daughter, carry my name and inherit my wealth. But I can't trust either of you now, not even Maria. The monastery in Nepal is the safest option for you. I'm not your prisoner, Isla cried. You can't just ship me off to another country. Edward regarded them coldly. Yes, I can. My friend there will take care of you very well. So, what will it be? Option 1. We sign some paperwork, some non-disclosure agreements and live comfortably together. Or option 2. Before either could respond, the sound of police sirens pierced the air, growing louder by the second. Jake rushed to the attic window, peering out at the street below. Cops, he reported gruffly. They've got the place surrounded. That maid is with them. A surge of hope shot through Isla at the mention of Maria. She must have heard their cries for help after all. Edward's face paled. He quickly replaced Isla's gag and turned to Jake. Watch them, he instructed. You know what to do. Jake nodded, a sinister grin spreading across his face as he reached for his phone. Isla exchanged a terrified look with her mother. What did "you know what to do" mean? Edward hurried down the attic stairs. He locked the door behind him, pocketing the key and taking a moment to compose himself. Everything was unraveling too quickly, but he'd been in tight situations before. He just needed to stay calm and think. He straightened his shirt collar and ran a hand through his hair, schooling his features into the pleasant, confident expression that had served him well through countless business negotiations. The front doorbell rang, its cheerful chime a stark contrast to the turmoil inside him. Through the frosted glass of the front door, Edward could make out several uniformed figures. He took a deep breath and opened the door, his practiced smile firmly in place. "Good afternoon, officers. Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice steady despite the panic fluttering in his chest. The lead officer stepped forward. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm Officer Brennan. We're responding to a complaint filed by Maria Alvarez." Edward's smile faltered When he spotted Maria standing behind the officers, her chin raised defiantly. The betrayal stung, though he should have expected it. People always disappointed him in the end. "Maria," he acknowledged coolly, "I thought we had resolved our issues earlier today." Officer Brennan consulted his notepad. "Ms. Alvarez has filed a formal complaint stating that you, as her former employer, have unlawfully withheld her personal property, specifically gold bars she entrusted to you for safekeeping and investment." Edward scoffed, crossing his arms. "That's ridiculous. She has no proof of such an arrangement." "Actually, sir," Maria spoke up, stepping forward with her phone in hand, "I have proof. The receipt of my bank transfer to your account 3 years ago, photos of the gold when you first showed it to me, and our text messages discussing the investment." Edward's mind raced. He'd forgotten about those messages, had assumed Maria wouldn't be savvy enough to keep such records. A miscalculation on his part. "We have a search warrant based on Ms. Alvarez's testimony," Officer Brennan continued, presenting the document. "We're authorized to search the premises for the gold in question." Edward felt the situation slipping from his control. More concerning than the gold was the possibility of them discovering Isla and Lena bound in the attic. He needed to get these officers out of his house as quickly as possible. "This is completely unnecessary," he said, forcing a conciliatory tone. "Maria, if this is about your gold, I'm happy to return what's rightfully yours. There's no need to involve the police." But the officers were already moving past him into the foyer, their eyes scanning the luxurious interior of the Caldwell mansion. "The gold, Mr. Caldwell," Officer Brennan prompted. "Where is it kept?" Edward's mind worked furiously. The 55 grams of gold that Maria was asking for, he had liquidated that years ago, using it to cover some losses when the market dipped. But he couldn't admit that now. "Let me check my storage room," he said, leading them toward a small room off the main hallway. Inside, he moved to a section of the wall that appeared ordinary, but concealed another safe, smaller than the one in his bedroom. He entered the combination, acutely aware of the officers watching his every move. The safe clicked open, revealing various valuable items, mostly jewelry he'd acquired over the years, some of it from his former wife. He selected several pieces that he estimated would approximate the value of Maria's missing gold. "Here," he said, turning to present them to Maria. "This should cover the value of what you claim is missing." Maria shook her head firmly. "This is not mine, Mr. Caldwell. My gold was a certified bar with my name on the certificate. It's worth more than these pieces because of that documentation." Edward felt a surge of frustration. He had indeed used her gold bar in a transaction years ago, gambling the money on some high-risk stocks that ultimately paid off handsomely. But she had no way of knowing that, or so he'd thought. "I must have used it for another investment," he admitted reluctantly. "I can give you the cash value plus interest." Before Maria could respond, a faint sound drifted down from above, the muffled but unmistakable cries for help. Everyone in the room froze, heads tilting upward. "What was that?" Officer Brennan asked sharply. "Probably the neighbor's child," Edward said dismissively. "They can be quite loud sometimes." The sound came again, more distinct this time. "That's Isla's voice," Maria said, her eyes widening. "Not the neighbor's. Where is she, Mr. Caldwell? You told me she went to her friend Carla's house." "She did," Edward insisted, but perspiration beaded on his forehead. "She must have returned while I was out looking for her." A third cry, followed by a thump from above, sent one of the officers moving toward the stairs. "The attic," Maria said urgently. "It's coming from the attic." Officer Brennan signaled to his colleagues. "Johnson, Martinez, check it out." "Wait," Edward called, but the officers were already halfway up the stairs. His mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. If they found Isla and Lena bound in the attic, there would be no explaining it away. Years of careful planning and control destroyed in an instant. With the other officers heading upstairs, only Officer Brennan remained with Edward and Maria in the storage room. In a split-second decision born of desperation, Edward lunged forward, driving his elbow into Brennan's sternum and sending him crashing into a shelf. As the younger officer reached for his weapon, Edward grabbed Maria's arm and wrenched the velvet pouch from her hand. She resisted, clawing at his arm to retrieve her property. With a vicious kick to her midsection, Edward sent her flying backward into the wall. Gold in hand, Edward sprinted toward the front door. Freedom was just yards away. He could disappear, use his offshore accounts, start over somewhere new. But as he burst outside, he found himself face to face with another officer stationed by the gate. The officer's hand moved instinctively to his holster. "Sir, no one is to leave the property at this time." "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," Edward said, forcing a friendly smile as he slowly approached. "I just need to retrieve something from my car." He kept talking, a steady stream of distractions as he closed the distance, preparing to overpower this final obstacle. But the officer was younger, stronger, and clearly trained for such situations. As Edward made his move, the officer smoothly sidestepped and deployed his taser. Edward's body convulsed as electricity coursed through him, the gold pouch falling from his grasp as he collapsed onto the manicured lawn. Through pain-blurred vision, he saw the officer retrieve the golden radio for backup. Within minutes, Edward found himself face down on the ground, cold metal handcuffs biting into his wrists as the officer recited his Miranda rights. From his position, he could see more police cars arriving, officers rushing into his home. Everything was falling apart. As they hauled him to his feet and led him toward a waiting police car, Edward caught sight of Isla and Lena being escorted from the house by officers, followed by Maria, Jake in handcuffs just behind them. Their eyes met for an instant. His daughter's gaze filled with a mixture of fear, confusion, and something worse, disappointment. "Oh, mi niña," Maria cried, stroking Isla's hair. "I was so worried." "Are you two hurt?" she asked Isla and Lena. Isla clung to Maria, tears flowing freely now. "You came back," she whispered. "You saved us." She caught sight of Edward being placed in a police car, his hands cuffed behind his back. Their eyes met briefly, his filled with cold fury, hers with a mixture of fear, sadness, and relief. Maria pulled back, cupping Isla's face in her hands. "Of course I came back. When I didn't hear from you, I got worried. I tried calling, but you didn't answer. I remembered the address you mentioned and came back to check on you, but you weren't there. I came here, but your dad said you were gone with your friends." She glanced at Lena, who stood watching their interaction with an unreadable expression. "I had a bad feeling, so I went to the police, told them everything, about the gold, about how strangely your father was acting, about you going to find your mother. They came right away." One of the officers approached them. "Mrs. Rivera," he addressed Lena. "We'll need statements from both you and your daughter." Lena nodded. "Of course, but first I want to know what's going to happen to Edward." "He's being charged with multiple offenses," the officer explained. "Kidnapping, assault, false imprisonment to start. His associate will face similar charges. They'll be taken to the station for processing." As the officer continued explaining the legal process, Maria pulled Isla aside. "Your father, he mentioned something about his office, about records there. I told the police, and they're sending a team to search it." Isla nodded absently, still processing everything that had happened. Her entire world had been upended in a single day. The father she thought she knew was being taken away in handcuffs. The mother she thought was dead stood just feet away. And Maria, the one constant in her life, had risked everything to save her. "What's going to happen to me now?" she asked quietly. Maria squeezed her hand. "I don't know, dear, but you're not alone. Remember that." The EMTs arrived to check Isla and Lena for injuries. Aside from bruising on their wrists and a bruise forming on Lena's cheek where Edward had struck her, they were physically unharmed. "We'll need you all to come to the station to give your statements," an officer informed them. "A representative from Child Services will meet us there to discuss temporary arrangements for the minor." Isla's heart sank at the word temporary. She looked between Maria and Lena, uncertain where she belonged now. As they were escorted to separate police cars, Isla caught a glimpse of Edward being driven away. The man who had raised her, who had taught her to ride a bike and helped with her homework, who had lied to her for 14 years and threatened to ship her off to a foreign place when the truth came out. She turned away, focusing instead on the road ahead and the uncertain future that awaited her. The police station buzzed with activity as Isla was led to a small private room. A woman in a navy blazer introduced herself as Ms. Chen from Child Protective Services, her kind smile doing little to ease Isla's anxiety. "I know this has been a traumatic day for you," Ms. Chen began. "I'm here to make sure you're safe and to figure out what happens next." Isla nodded numbly, clutching the paper cup of hot chocolate someone had pressed into her hands. She felt drained, her mind struggling to process the cascade of revelations and horrors she'd experienced. She recounted everything: the photograph in the attic, Maria's firing, finding the divorce documents, meeting Lena, and Edward's subsequent violence. Ms. Chen listened attentively, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "You've been incredibly brave," Ms. Chen told her when she finished. "Now we need to discuss your living arrangements going forward." A spark of hope flickered in Isla's chest. "Can I stay with my mom?" "With Lena?" Ms. Chen's expression turned sympathetic. "That's what we need to talk about. There's been a development." As if on cue, a police officer entered the room and whispered something to Ms. Chen. Her eyebrows rose in surprise, and she nodded grimly. "What is it?" Isla asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "What's happened?" Ms. Chen sighed. "Your father has made some serious allegations against your mother, Lena. He claims she's a drug user and therefore unfit to care for you." "That's a lie," Isla exclaimed. "He's just trying to control us again." "We take all allegations seriously," Ms. Chen explained. "The officers who searched Lena's home found substances that need to be tested. Until we can verify or disprove his claims, Lena cannot be considered for guardianship." Isla's heart sank. "But that's not fair. He probably planted those things himself. Lena was kind, calm and clear-headed when I met her. She's nothing like what he's saying." She turned to the officer, her voice rising. "The man who watched over us in the attic, Jake, he was calling someone. I couldn't hear what he said, but Edward told him to do what he's supposed to do." When police arrived, "You have to check them. They might have planted those substances there, please." "I understand your frustration, and thank you for sharing the detail with us, Ms. Caldwell," Ms. Chen said gently. "The investigation will be thorough. In the meantime, we need to find a temporary placement for you." "What about Maria?" Isla asked desperately. "Can I stay with her? She's taken care of me since I was 3. "We'll need to speak with her and conduct a background check," Ms. Chen replied. "Would you like me to bring her in so we can discuss it?" Isla nodded eagerly, clinging to the possibility of staying with the one person who had been a constant in her life. A few minutes later, Maria entered the room, immediately moving to Isla's side and taking her hand. Ms. Chen explained the situation, Edward's allegations against Lena, the need for Isla to enter temporary care, and Isla's request to stay with Maria. "Would you be willing to act as Isla's guardian during this transitional period?" Ms. Chen asked. Maria's expression was pained. She squeezed Isla's hand. "Mi niña, I love you very much, but—" She trailed off, clearly struggling with her response. Isla's heart sank. "But what? Don't you want me?" "Of course I want you," Maria assured her quickly. "It's just, I don't have my own home. All these years I've lived at Mr. Caldwell's house. When I'm not there, I stay with my brother in a very small apartment. It's not a proper place for a young lady like you." Tears welled in Isla's eyes as the weight of it all settled over her. Was this what her father meant? That she'd end up living a sad, lonely life? With both her parents out of reach, she wasn't going home. She was heading into the foster system, a future she'd never imagined, a fate she'd never prepared for. "I understand," she whispered, though her heart was breaking. Maria's face crumpled at Isla's resignation. She seemed to be wrestling with something internally. Then determination crossed her features, and she straightened her shoulders. Opening her purse, Maria removed the velvet pouch Edward had given her earlier that day. "The gold," she said, placing it on the table. "We can sell this. It will give us enough to find a place to stay, and I will find another job. I can be your guardian." Isla looked up in surprise. "You would do that for me?" "You are like a daughter to me," Maria said simply. "I will not abandon you." Ms. Chen observed their interaction with interest. That could be a viable solution, she acknowledged. If you can secure suitable housing and employment, we can work on making a more permanent arrangement. Hope bloomed in Isla's chest, but reality quickly tempered it. Even if Maria sold the gold immediately, finding housing and a job would take time. In the meantime, Isla would still need to enter the system. So I'll still have to go with strangers, she asked, her voice small. Just temporarily, Ms. Chen assured her, and we'll expedite Maria's application as much as possible. The weight of everything that had happened finally crashed down on Isla. She began to sob, years of buried emotions pouring out at once. Maria pulled her close, stroking her hair and murmuring soothing words in Spanish. "I'm sorry if I was ever annoying," Isla cried. "I know I followed you around all the time and talked too much, but you were always there for me when Dad was busy or away. You were like a mom and a best friend all in one." "Niña," Maria susurró, "you were never annoying. You brought joy and purpose to my life every single day." Ms. Chen watched them with compassion, allowing them this moment of connection. When Isla's sobs subsided to quiet hiccups, she gently suggested they continue the paperwork process. As they worked through the forms, a plan began to take shape. Maria would stay with her brother temporarily while searching for a job and an apartment. Once she had secured both, they would petition for her to become Isla's guardian. In the meantime, Isla would be placed with a foster family who had been vetted by the agency. It wasn't perfect, but it was something to hold on to, a light at the end of what had been the darkest day of Isla's young life. As Isla prepared to leave with Ms. Chen to meet her temporary foster family, the full weight of what had happened settled over her. In his own perverse way, her father had achieved what he'd threatened in the attic. Everyone was separated, just as he'd warned in his Option 2 scenario. Edward was in jail facing serious charges. Lena was under investigation, her character and fitness as a mother in question because of the substances conveniently found in her home. And Isla herself was entering the foster care system. Not a monastery in Nepal, but a place of uncertainty, and strangers nonetheless. The realization sent a chill down her spine. Even in defeat, Edward had managed to tear them all apart. His final act of control had succeeded where his threats had failed. "Are you ready?" Ms. Chen asked gently, touching Isla's shoulder. Isla looked back at Maria, who stood watching her with eyes full of love and determination. If not for Maria, her courage in going to the police, her willingness to sacrifice what little she had to create a home for Isla, the future would seem unbearably bleak. "Be patient," Maria repeated, her voice steady despite the tears shining in her eyes. "I will pray every day for a good job to come quickly, and I will visit you as often as they allow." Isla nodded, trying to be brave. "I know you will." As Ms. Chen led her toward the door where her temporary foster family waited, Isla paused for one last look at Maria. Despite everything, the lies, the violence, the upheaval, she wasn't completely alone. Her father might have succeeded in separating them all for now, but he had underestimated the bonds that had formed outside his control. The love between a housekeeper and the girl she had quietly mothered for years wasn't something that could be broken with threats or prison walls or system bureaucracy. It was resilient, patient, and stronger than any scheme Edward could devise. It wasn't the ending she would have chosen for this day, but it was a beginning, uncertain and challenging, but filled with more truth and genuine love than she had known in all her 14 years. Edward might have temporarily won this round, but with Maria fighting for her, Isla knew they would ultimately prevail. With one last wave to Maria, Isla stepped forward to meet her temporary guardians, holding tight to the promise of a future where she would no longer live surrounded by secrets and lies.